Yo, 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 what's going on? It's the NRW where nerds rule the world. It's your boy, Kuyapi, aka Patrick Michael Strange. I'm super excited because today I'm going to have one of my favorite comic creators out right now. He's working on one of my favorite comic titles out right now for Image Comics. You can probably see it in the background. I'll move out the way because it's amazing artwork. Home, my man, Julio Anta, and he's working with the amazing Anna Wieczek. I probably brutalized that name real quick. I'm sorry, Anna. My apologies. But your artwork is amazing. But yeah, we're going to kick it off right now. I'm going to throw you to the trailer that Image Comics put out so you can just learn a little bit about it. But then after that, we're going to dig in with my man Julio. We're going to learn all about the comic and reasons why you should pick it up and why it's so amazing. And we're also going to get a little bit of his origin story, as you know I like to do. So let's kick it off with the trailer for Home from Image Comics. Julio Anta, Anna Wieczek. Here we go. Boom, there you go. You can see him on the screen. Air horns, my man, Julio.
Hey
That's
guys.
a comics creator right behind home.
I appreciate it.
Oh man, truly a pleasure. It's wild. I think, as I stated earlier, right before we started recording, man, I was already peeping home. Once I saw the solicitations from Image about this title, reading the breakdown, I was like, I have to read this. This is amazing. I just love it in every way because I think, as storytellers and as immigrants and as POCs, pun, I'm going to hit a pun. It hits home.
Yep.
I was sold from the solicit, man. Julio, it's a pleasure to have you on, man. Thank you so much for joining me.
It's a pleasure to be on. I appreciate it. Thank you.
So if we can kick it off with how did this idea first pop into your head? Where did Home start with you? And we'll dig into this project a little bit and how it all came.
For sure. Well, for those who don't know, Home is essentially, I'll give the quick elevator pitch before we get into where it came from. Home is a story of a boy named Juan and his mother Mercedes, who are separated at the border. And just as he's dealing with all of this anxiety and trauma that comes with, being a 10-year-old boy separated from your mother, superhuman abilities emerge in him. And that's pretty much where we kick off with this book. Home is definitely inspired by and takes place during the family separation crisis of the spring of 2018, when the administration decided to start separating families as a form of deterrence at the border, as a cruel form of deterrence. It started this, if you ask me, this mental health epidemic that we're going to be dealing with for who knows how long, with these kids and families who are going to be dealing with this trauma for the rest of their life. My background is that my father is a Cuban immigrant. He came here when he was 3 years old as a refugee. My mother was born here. Her parents were undocumented immigrants from Colombia. I was born and raised in Miami. So, I grew up obviously in an immigrant household, immigrant community of Miami, which is a minority majority city, mostly Latino, mostly Cuban. Growing up, all the kids that I went to school with, if they weren't like me, born here to immigrant parents, they were immigrants themselves, So I grew up hearing all these stories from my family, hearing stories from all my friends. And then in 2018, as a new father myself, I saw what was happening at the border with family separation. I saw my father as a 3-year-old being brought here as a refugee in the eyes of these kids, and I saw my own son as well. And like a lot of people, I was, it broke me in a way that, I tend to think that I have a pretty cynical view of the way that this country has treated immigrants throughout its history. But this, separating kids from their family as a way to deter other people, to me, that was a new low that I didn't see coming, and it was hard. It was really, my personality, I started obsessing with this issue and following the story. Every time new news would come out about it, I was reading it, I was listening to interviews with the families, watching local news reports from the area. And I think in hindsight, as I think about it, starting this book was almost a way of helping me cope with the situation of seeing people like me treated this way, in a way that was worse than I could have even imagined. So, I think it was probably late summer, early fall of 2018 that I had the idea for Home. And, I hadn't written any comics at the time. So then it was up to me to kind of teach myself how to write comics as just a fan of the medium, to try to make this book a reality.
Awesome, awesome, man. I feel you in every way. Yeah, when all of that was occurring, I'm Filipino heritage, and I was born here, but my mom, came over from the Philippines and everything like that. I think everyone that's, you don't have to be Latino. You as immigrants, you can all feel this, and that was just I entered a dark period as well, man. I think a lot of us did, because you could just relate to that, and that was just, as you stated, a new low that you never think you'd ever see. And I'm thankful that you're telling how we feel and how you feel through this medium, to because art and music, I think we all know that's how the message can come across a lot, and it comes easier to people, which is sad, because they just don't want to hear us talk. They think we're just complaining, and they're not listening. So to reach in this way, maybe that can get them a little bit better. But man, so this happened. What were the first steps? You said this was your first comic book that you put together. Were you? I didn't look too much into your prior background. So did you? What was your writing experience before this?
I grew up in the punk and hardcore scene of South Florida and Miami. So, I came up playing in bands. I started my own record label, just like a DIY record label. But I also wrote for zines and like online websites. So like, writing about shows, writing like CD reviews, that was really the extent of my, like writing experience. But I loved comics. I've been reading comics since I was a kid, ever since I walked into this anime store in Miami, that my friend told me about, to buy fan sub VHSs, and that's where I learned about manga. That's where I saw, my first comic was like a Sonic Archie comic from like a pharmacy.
Okay. Yeah. I dig
that. But that was my first time in like a comic book store, where they had like Western comics on the rack, that it was around the time of Civil War.
Okay.
So that was my first experience. And ever since then, man, like I've read comics, I've loved comics. So when I thought about, when I had the idea for the story, that was right away the medium that I knew that I wanted to pursue this in,
Gotcha.
And it also felt like something that I could do. I think most comic readers have probably had that idea, like, I could probably write this, so this was my way of trying to see if I could.
Awesome. All right, cool. I love it. So let's talk about it. So from concept, you came up with this brilliant idea. How did this pitch start rolling? Like, how did you immediately hit up like an editor, Image? Who did you know? How did you get this ball rolling? Bringing on Anna Wieszczek, and sorry again, Anna, for brutalizing your name. How did just this amazing idea come into fruition?
Well, it's a pretty long kind of winding story, but the short version is that, I had to, like I said, I was a comic fan, but I didn't know the way that the industry worked. I didn't know, the pitching process. I didn't know how to find an artist, how to build a creative team or anything like that. So I started doing research, and a lot of that was just like being on Twitter, reaching out to creators, reading message boards, and people like Jim Zub, his website, which is super instructional. I read Brian Michael Bendis's book on writing comics, and eventually I ended up on a subreddit, which I don't think that's really like the origin story for a lot of creative teams at Image, but that's where I found Anna. It's a subreddit for I think it's a comic book collapse is the name of the subreddit, and essentially you put like a listing up, like, hey, I'm a writer, I want to find an artist that I can work on this story idea with, and I put it up. I put up like the basic idea, pretty much what was the solicitation text that Image eventually used, and a few people reached out. That was my first experience with the kind of criticism that the book would get from, the conservative, spectrum of comics. But Anna reached out, and she was like, hey, this idea sounds really interesting. Let's talk more about it. And that's how we hooked up for the first time. And then after that, I had to find the rest of the creative team, which came later. But a really great piece of advice that I got was from Ed Brisson, the writer. And he told me that the best way to start as a writer in comics is not to start with like a series or a mini series, but to work on short stories. So while I was talking to Anna and trying to figure out how to make Home a reality, I started doing mini comics. And they're on my website right now, but I just put them up for free. And through, I guess, 2019 through 2020, I put out 5 mini comics, ranging in, from 4 to like 10 pages. And these were just short stories about, whatever I was angry about at the time, just getting things off my chest the same way that Home is getting things off my chest. But it helped me become a better writer, almost like prepare for Home. Because the process of putting together the pitch was a pretty long process. It wasn't just finding Anna, she draws the pages and that's it. It was learning what a pitch looks like. And I took an online class with Alex Segura, the comic writer. He works for Oni now. He used to work for Archie. But it was a class about how to create a pitch and what editors and publishers are looking for. So, it was pretty much like a 2-year process of figuring out how to create a pitch, how to write comics. And then eventually I ended up at New York City Comic Con in 2019, the last year that we had a Comic Con here. And, I started going up to booths and cold pitching editors, and it was an interesting experience. Not going to say one that I'd recommend, because it's a lot of, feeling like you're cornering people and like making them listen to your idea, and some people were into it. Some of them thought it was, they're like, oh, that sounds like important work, but it's a little too political for us. But, great job. And, like kindly rejected the book, but eventually I ended up at Image's booth. And I was talking to an editor from one of their imprints. And the editor really loved the idea, but didn't think it was the right fit for her particular imprint. But essentially put it in front of Eric Stevenson, the publisher at Image. And it took a while, it was months later. This is October. By February, we finally, I got the green light from Eric at Image, and, we were off to the races essentially. But it was a long process, as you can imagine, somebody who's never written a comic to get published by Image, like it was like a 2-year process to get to that point.
Oh, totally. I've been there, done that. I've self-published like 5 different books and worked on a couple of different projects before I started actually dabbling with podcasting. It's kind of like my gateway. So I totally know that process. I'm curious. So was the first issue complete? What you were pitching, was that the first issue completed or just some of the pages?
It was the first 8 pages of the issue.
The first 8 pages. And then you got picked up.
Yeah. And, but it was a full pitch too, like a synopsis of the entire series, a lot of info on all the characters. But yeah, completed pages was 8. And then once we got the green light, we went ahead and, made the rest of it.
Yeah. So, cause you got funded and then you could then hire. So did,
well, it's Image. So you're not necessarily funded.
That's true too.
So this was all, out of my own pocket. It was something that I was really passionate about.
Got it. That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah, but you
Yeah.
know, like the book has been successful so far. And you know, it's paid off, you know, and even if we didn't make the money back, you know, that I spent on the book, like that wasn't the point anyway. You know, the
Yeah.
point was to, you know, try to get this book in front of people to, you know, show Latino characters in a positive way, which I think is something that we very rarely see. But then also, you know, in a way, present an argument to people who, you know, you kind of mentioned this earlier, but you know, people who maybe, you know, didn't pay attention to family separation when it was happening, didn't understand it. And you know, a way to try to convince, you know, try to change people's mind. You know, that's my idealistic self speaking. You know, I totally understand that most people reading it are like you know, like-minded people. But you know, I like to think that maybe we've caught some other people who, you know, didn't understand until they read the book, hopefully.
Definitely. I hope so, man. And I got to, since sincerely, man, I have to applaud you, brother, to self-fund until you got picked up and it made an Image started making it happen. And hopefully, yeah, I hope that you just this I'm hoping for the stars for you, brother. I love that
Appreciate that.
passion because I know what it takes. And so many people that have these lofty goals and dreams, when they see the other aspects of it, the finances, the marketing, they then give up. And you
Yeah.
believed in yourself, bro. I love that. That's a success story to me, man. And like,
Thank you, brother.
now I want nothing but the stars for you, bro. I really love that because it's that's what it takes. And also when you have something of substance that you're doing and making a difference, like you just stated, oh my gosh, yeah, this needs to be out there. And so, man, bravo. I love that.
Thank you.
That's amazing. So it's a 5-issue miniseries, correct?
Yep.
That you're telling the story, and we have already the first 2 issues out, I believe. I've read the first
2 are out. Third is out a week from Wednesday, June 16th, and then we got 2 more after that. So it'll wrap up in August.
Awesome! I can't wait. I don't want to spoil anything, and we've already kind of given the nuts and bolts of it. I'm trying to figure out ways to not spoil it, because I have other questions, but I don't want to dig into it too much. What are the are there any other ancillary plans? Because again, like I said, I see the stars for this, and it plays so well, and it's so powerful and impactful. Has an Image, and as you see, actually, as of this weekend of this recording, Sweet Tooth, an amazing Image Comics title. I'm forgetting who's the writer artist behind that.
Jeff Lemire.
Lemire, yes. I'm actually interviewing the cast this coming week after this.
Nice.
So I was super excited for that. But yeah, with Sweet Tooth getting translated, with other projects, you know, they're mining. Hollywood is mining the amazing work that we're putting out in comics. Has there been any thing along that realm coming your way at all? Because I would, bro, it plays itself. I want, like I said, I see the stars for this. What is your desire along with telling? I know I'm pretty sure your concentration is just the book, getting these 5 issues rolled out. But are you thinking any other ways with this book as well?
Yeah, I mean, you know, nothing that I can talk about right now.
Okay.
But you know, I'll say this, like, obviously this is a really unique book because we so rarely see these stories, these immigrant stories in comics. It's unfortunate that this is such a unique book, you know. I've gotten so many messages from people saying like, this is the first time I've seen myself in a comic, you know, as a Latino. You know, this is the first time I've seen these immigrant stories in the direct market, especially. You know, the book market, you know, you see books like George Takei's book, you see other books in like the YA space from book publishers, but in the comics market, you so rarely see, you know, people like us and like our families represented in comics. So, you know, it's unfortunate, you know, I don't say that to like, you know, hype up the book or anything. I wish that this was, you know, that this was just one of many stories in the direct market about these kinds of characters. But, you know, as soon as that announcement went up, Image got us an announcement from the Hollywood Reporter. I started getting emails that same day, you know. So, you know, there's things in the works. I can't speak on anything, you know, TV related, but you know, if you're if you're somebody who speculates on books, you can take this as there's things in the works, you know.
Well, I'm going to champion it all the way through, my friend. You got a fan in me. I definitely want to see this happen. And I can't wait. I know you can't say, but like I said, I'm going to cheer it on. I'm going to champion it forward. And I'm just going to do everything. And I hope to be talking to the cast of Home the following week. You feel me? So I love it, man. And yeah, so let's dig into the origin story. We already kind of touched upon it a little bit there, and then we'll get back to a little bit of Home because I'm trying to think of things I can ask you without spoiling stuff and that's out there. But yeah, let's dig into the origin story of you, man, because you sound very interesting from everything you said you've been doing. I'm all about art and music and obviously comics, and I dabble in film. Let's talk about you, man. Let's talk about your. I like to start off from the beginning because to me, we're right now. You're a beautiful tree, you're a beautiful flower, you know. So I like to start from the seed, and what created that seed was your amazing parents. And to me, we as and I'm sure because you're a father as well. We are the hopes and dreams of our parents, and as immigrants, as POCs, as family, you know, we're very family oriented. So can you tell us about your parents' love story, how they came together, a little bit about them, into you coming into being that you can recall or know, and then starting your journey growing up in the world?
Sure. Yeah. So look, like I said, from Miami, my dad came to Miami. His parents brought him when he was 3. My mom was born in the US to undocumented parents. You know, Miami's a melting pot. You know, I know most people see Miami as, you know, this party town, South Beach, you know, what they see in the movies. But really, Miami's just like this series of communities just coming together. You know, we got Little Havana, we got Cubans everywhere, but, you know, Little Havana, Little Haiti, there's Asian neighborhoods. You know, it's a city that, you know, I think is 70% Latino. It was even more than that before. But, you know, it's a city that I grew up speaking Spanish. I grew up, you know, going to stores and you're greeted in Spanish. You know, everyone who lives there knows at least a little Spanish, you know, even if you're not, you know, Latino or from any Spanish speaking country. You know, so they met there in Miami. I came very soon after they got married. You know, I grew up all over Miami pretty much. Like I said, you know, I was born in Hialeah, which is, you know, one of the most Cuban parts of Miami. But then as I grew up, we moved to an area called Doral, which was like a new development. You know, it was like this marshland that was turning into, you know, new suburbs essentially. And for whatever reason, I wish I knew the history of why. But Doral, you know, tons of Venezuelans that were immigrating essentially put down their roots in Doral. So, you know, I grew up with all these kids that were either just came from Venezuela or were born here and their parents had come. You know, a bunch of Cuban kids too, Colombians, like my mom's side. And, you know, just hearing all these different stories, hearing all these different dialects of Spanish just coming together. You know, Spanish is a language where in one culture, a word means one thing. In another culture, it means something super offensive, you know. So, you know, all these really awkward moments where I'm speaking Spanish or understanding what they're saying in Spanish and just taking it a totally different way. But, you know, it was this great like coming together, you know, because I think you can probably relate to this, but, you know, I know that a lot of, you know, white America and American culture likes to take our groups and make them their own monolith, you know.
Oh yeah.
This is what Asian Americans are like. This is what Latinos are like. This is what African Americans are like. But when in reality, you know, we're such a diverse culture. You know, Latinos have been coming to the US for, you know, generations. Latin America, Central America, the Caribbean, Mexico, these are all cultures that are so different from each other. You know, and then also like different classes of people coming, you know, from different economic areas. So, you know, we're coming here with all sorts of different cultures and just like melding it all together. And it's not as cookie cutter and clear cut as people want to make it seem, you know. Coming from that community, I'm in New York now. I moved here when I was 20. It was kind of a like a mind altering experience to experience the world outside of Miami for the first time. You know, um, you know, every culture has their own prejudices, obviously, even within Latino culture against people from other countries in Latin America, but living in Miami, I never experienced any interpersonal racism. Like nobody ever called me a derogatory term until I left Miami, and experiencing that for the first time, leaving Miami, in New York, in other places in the Northeast that I've been around. It was kind of a mind-blowing experience to me, because I grew up in this place where, you walk into a store, people speak Spanish, to then hear pushback for the first time about speaking Spanish somewhere else, was a new experience for me. So I feel like when I left Miami, I started identifying a lot more with the culture that I left behind in Miami and with my Hispanic or Latino culture, and appreciating it a lot more and wanting to hold on to it a lot tighter than when I was even in Miami. So then when everything started happening with Trump, with family separation, that hit me really hard, a lot harder than, I hear it hitting people that I know back in Miami, because they're seeing their world pretty much remain the same, while me and other people are seeing our world change, so it was tough, and like I alluded to earlier, most of the things I write come from a place of anger, from pain. And that's where Home and all the other, the mini comics that I did came from, telling stories of a Mexican American ICE agent, a father whose kid had just been gunned down by a cop. These stories were about, things that I was either seeing, learning about, or angry about. And comics and writing comics really helped me, find a way to channel that.
Dude, I love it. You're just dropping knowledge. I didn't want to stop you. I was like, let this man go. Man, I'm going to take you back to Miami, though. Let's just take you back to Miami.
Yeah.
Were you this knowledgeable back then as well? When you were?
No.
Because, okay, so like it wasn't until, like you said, until you left to Brooklyn and New York. So okay, so that all right. So we're back in Miami. So you had a different lens, obviously, because of what was your experience, and then you could just go to your shop, like you said, and speak the language and not have to worry about the racism and all of that. So tell us about those before you leave at 20, growing up there. What would your parents tell us about young Julio? What were you into at that time and getting into?
Yeah, I mean, look, man, you mentioned being the hopes and dreams of your parents, it's a beautiful thing, but it's also a burden,
Yeah.
It's also, expectations. So, what my parents probably would have said is that I don't focus in school enough, that I don't take the opportunities that they've worked so hard to give me, and really, take advantage of them to the fullest, I play too much video games. I watch too much TV, read too much comics, that's probably what they'd say, I think they're proud of what I'm doing now. It's tough, it's tough when you're 13, 15, 18, trying to figure out what you're into. And you have your family who sacrificed so much, to, SAT tutoring, whatever that thing was that they wanted you to do to be better than what they were able to do, so it's hard, but I think the thing to understand about Miami too is that, because it's this place that I said, this minority majority city where, people are speaking Spanish, you're mostly accepted by the white population, not 100%, but, in a certain way, they're living in your world there, in a way that I think is different from places like LA and California, where obviously huge Hispanic, Mexican populations, but it's different, that's why you see cities like Miami, I don't think there's really any other city to compare it to, but you see a place like Miami, voting for Trump and supporting Trump, because these are people that, for better or for worse, they feel like they have achieved the American dream, based off of their own hard work, and they've built this place that is the American dream, and where they don't feel held back. They don't feel, at a certain point, you don't feel like you have to fight for everything. So at a certain point you think, all right, you know what, I want to pay a lot less taxes. All these new people that are coming in, they're not like me. They want to get welfare. Like, I came here with $5 in my pocket. I worked for it. These new immigrants that are coming in here, they're different. They're not like what it was when I came. And you get this mentality that almost forgets the struggle, and doesn't allow you to align with people who are coming now, with people who are coming to the southern border asking for asylum, like Juan Image says in the book. So I think leaving Miami, and also, I mentioned being part of like the punk and the hardcore community, that allowed me to open my mind and kind of see other perspectives that were different from my reality. And even though I didn't really grow up with a lot of Mexican kids, or kids from Guatemala like Juan, to be able to identify with people who do feel like they need to come here and they can't wait for the so-called right process. They can't just get in line and wait their turn. They feel like they're in danger and they need to come here. Just like my dad did when he was 3 years old. They felt like they had to escape the island and come here. So I think it's a complicated conversation, but one that I'm lucky that I was able to kind of broaden my views on, which eventually led to writing this book.
Hell yeah, bruh. Just real fucking talk. I'm sorry, excuse my language. I just like there's different parts like I wanted to interject because there's stuff I want to ask you. But like, yo, in the I'm Filipino community, it's the same frustration that we have that I have to tell you that you're experiencing, and it's everywhere. It's wild and it's sad all at the same time, because we're not that far removed from that transition that they did. Yet they now walk with blinders, and they've assimilated so much. It's sad and it's hard.
That's the trap of assimilation, man.
Hell yeah, bro.
But you know what, man? For our parents, for that generation, assimilation was survival.
That's very true.
It's not a black and white thing. Like I think a lot about Cubans, like my father, and a lot of Latinos, especially, light-skinned Latinos like me, it's this chase for whiteness over generations, and I think that's why we see all these Cubans voting for Trump, because I think it's subconsciously or consciously, they feel like they've achieved whiteness, and now they've gotten past the struggles that people are dealing with now, but, to your point, like, it's assimilation, but it's also, it's hard for me to say that, people of your parents' generation and my parents' generation, it's hard for me to say that they shouldn't have assimilated, because that was their way of surviving and their way of giving us, what they gave us too, but it's tough, it's not an easy thing.
Man, so true, bro. So true. So growing up, before you leave out to go up to New York, so you rebelled a little bit. You got into punk stuff. So what were you getting into to maybe indicate influences of what you do later on? Like what were you into as far as like music? You said punk or art, film that you were doing in high school and then leaving at 20. Did you leave for college or just the change to get away from Miami?
Just to get out of Miami, man.
Yeah.
Just for a change. Yeah. So like I mentioned growing up in punk and hardcore, I was playing drums. I got into drums in middle school, like in band class, jazz band, symphonic band, doing that whole thing. But then one day, a friend of mine introduced me to, to different bands, introduced me to, political music, to political punk bands. Things that I might cringe at a little bit now, bands like Anti-Flag, the Casualties, things like that. But it was things that it was my first time hearing about, hearing anti-war rhetoric, hearing leftist politics in a way that I wasn't hearing, in my community, because politics wasn't really a huge conversation in general. But when it was, the thing about Latino culture is that it's very embedded with religion, with Catholicism.
Oh
With my
man, hell
family, it
yeah.
was evangelicalism. So, with a lot of that, it kind of, it veers conservative. So like, so my first introduction to, these kinds of things were from a white lens too, hearing these white bands talk about their leftist politics. And then getting involved in this hardcore scene, which, it's Miami, so it is still predominantly, a Latino scene. Excuse me. But getting into all these bands, meeting people, who are rebelling in their own way, trying to figure out their own identity. It was my first time, meeting, queer people who were out. I'm sure I interacted with plenty of people who weren't out. But it was my first time, kind of trying to think differently from, the religious ideas that I was brought up with, and meeting people. And unfortunately, for a lot of people, and for me at the time, as like a 15-year-old kid, it takes meeting people who are different from you to identify with them and to realize that, they're not whatever you've been told they are. So for me, that's what that punk and hardcore community was about. It was about broadening my horizons, and if I hadn't gotten involved in that, I'm not sure that I would have left Miami and moved to New York, which took me a step further. But that was a big part of my life.
Hell yeah. I love it. I love that it opened your mind up, man. And so did you finish high school before you left or college or did you go to college?
Finished high school, went to college, dropped out of college, moved to New York,
Okay.
and worked here, been working here
Gotcha.
until things started kicking off with writing.
So so before you headed off to college and you chose to do what you chose to do, the immigrant story that we all have, because they work so hard. They want us to
Yeah.
become lawyers, doctors, accountants, or at least
Hmm.
that's what we get as Filipinos. I'm pretty sure it's probably the same deal, just
Yeah,
a
not too
good
far
paying
off.
job, as
Yeah.
immigrants. Uh, what did you want to do? Do you recall what you wanted to do at that point for
Yeah.
your life and career? But then did you then get influenced by those parents that are saying, no, I don't want you to follow the arts? Especially as Filipinos, they never want us to follow the arts. They want us to be an accountant or a doctor. Did you kind of get the same deal? How was that in your story in regards to, finding your own way?
Yeah, to a certain extent, my parents were supportive of me playing music, uh, growing up in Miami, in the area that I grew up, there wasn't a high school. It was the public high school was pretty far away. So what a lot of kids did was apply to magnet schools, which are like these specialty schools. So, my parents, they got me like private tutoring to try to get into a music high school. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. That kind of led me to the further realization eventually that as I was getting older, playing in bands, I wasn't good enough to like, continue playing in bands and make it a real thing. And that's when I transitioned to like writing for zines, starting my own record label. But when I went to college, it was for journalism. My dream was to be a music journalist, essentially. And I did do that for a little bit. When I was 18, I went on Warped Tour for 2 weeks, working for a company as like a blogger. And it's one of those things where it's like earlier days, like MySpace, internet, like all that stuff's wiped clean at this point. Even if somebody tried to find it, but you can still find like some of my music reviews online. But yeah, that's what I was pretty much pursuing at the time. And it was my way of staying connected to that scene, even though, I realized, kind of pragmatically that I wasn't good enough to, make music a career for myself. But yeah, and then eventually, like starting the label is something that I did for a long time, putting out vinyl records, cassette tapes, first for bands that I was friends with, and eventually for bigger bands, and getting like bigger distribution and stuff. But when I decided to write home and to try to pursue comics, I knew that I couldn't keep pouring myself into other people's creative work. I had to try to focus on mine, especially because it was, to tell these stories that I was passionate about, that I am passionate about. So that's when I made the transition from, doing the label to doing the writing.
Awesome. bro, you just kind of hit really close to home for me just now because yeah, so like I'm doing this with you. I'm talking to you, celebrating you and talking about your projects. But like for the past couple of months, I've been like, I need to start concentrating on my shit that I've been working on and building, but I took a pause because, you know, I wasn't, as we stated earlier, trying to make your comic book happen. You know, I self-published a bunch of books, put a lot of money into it. You know, some stuff got picked up, some deals I got, but then it doesn't go anywhere. And so, you know, you just get into a weird flux of creativity. And so I was going in and out of comics and film and all that. So yeah, bro, we're so very similar. It's crazy. So, man, so you're in New York, you're killing it. Yeah. You know, so you were doing the music thing and then you wanted to do home and you put your heart and soul into it. And again, I absolutely adore that. I love that. When did you become a father in this mix because that changes a person. I know for myself and my creativity, you know, once my daughter was born, I was still doing it, but then I learned that I needed to put equal time in because I want to keep, I love my wife and she's so amazing. If I was to just still do that and have a child, she probably wouldn't have wanted to still be with me, you know?
I get it. It's a balancing
hard.
Act.
So can you just tell about how that influences we discussed it earlier, how that influenced with you and home a little bit, but if we can just get a little bit more to that, becoming a father and that taking over with your creativity and all that.
Yeah. So my son, he's 6.5 now. So 6.5 years ago, you know, I was doing the label at the time. And, you know, that's a lot of like, you know, shipping records out of our little apartment, you know, once he goes to bed, you know, doing that, like, you know, DIY, like messaging people, you know, messaging blogs, that kind of thing, kind of what I'm doing now with home. But for myself, you know, so it was a lot of hard work, but it's a balance. Yeah. Like to your point, you know, I couldn't keep putting all of my energy into the label. I had to balance it with him too. Now, you know, he's older. It's a lot easier now, to, you know, focus on my writing and give it the time that it needs, while still, you know, being a father, being a husband, and doing all that. But, you know, like, having a son for me, it made me a lot more, you know, I don't know if the right way to say it is it made me a lot more emotional, but it made me a lot, I feel like I feel more now. You know, my sense of justice is a lot more heightened, you know, for better or worse. You know, usually that just gets me angry and pissed off about things, you know, because things aren't the way that they should be. But it's also what leads me to write a book like Home and to write the other things that I write. It's knowing that, you know, it's having that core belief, at least, you know, however naive that it might be, that most people, if you can make the better argument, will come along with you, you know, and change the way that they believe. Not all people, but, you know, I like to think that inside of most people, they can, if you can find how to connect with them to your story or to whatever the story that you're advocating for is, then maybe you can change their mind to a certain extent, you know? And I think that's something that came along with being a father. You know, I'm not sure that I would have written this book if I wasn't a father, you know, that I wouldn't have, you know, when I think about it, like a lot of the Home, obviously, but a lot of the books that I have coming up, a lot of them, the protagonist is a kid, you know, and, you know, someone might want to psychoanalyze me as to why that is, you know, repressed childhood, whatever. But I think it's also, you know, being able to know how much I love my son and understand how much and what lengths other people are willing to do because they love their children so much. And, you know, when it comes to, you know, our family's immigrant backgrounds, the story of Juan and Mercedes, it's that, you know, sometimes you can't do whatever the supposed right thing is or the legal thing is. You know, you have to do what you have to do for your kid, you know, and that might be crossing a border, you know, crossing these imaginary lines that were dictated by people, you know, however many years ago, and pursuing, you know, what you need to do for your kid. So like I said, shorter winded version of it. I'm not sure I would have been able to do that until I had a son.
Hell yeah, bro. Same. Family changes, everything changes, perspective changes, focus, and I think all for the better. All for the better.
For sure.
And I feel you so much and deeply on that because that's what it did for me. So amazing work, man, with Home and
Thank you.
everything you've told us about thus far. I know you have some other projects. Is there any information you can talk to about that without spoiling anything? From my notes I have from Harper Alley, you're going to be dropping Frontera or these have already dropped. I'm not sure. Frontera with Harper Alley and Si Se Puede with 10 Speed Press. Can you talk on that?
Yeah, so those are future releases. They're not out yet.
Okay.
So Frontera is it's a YA book. So it's for ages like 12 to 16. Excuse me. But it's essentially it's a border story. Unlike Home, which mostly takes place in the U.S., this is a story about a young boy who was deported to Mexico. He had no idea that he was undocumented until the day that he and his parents are deported. And his parents send him back across the border. And while he's going through the Sonoran Desert, he encounters the ghost of another migrant that had passed away in that desert half a century ago. And through that story, we kind of explore the parallels between their story. 50 years separated, different laws, different politics, different technology in the desert, but kind of the same story. Two young men trying to go back to a better life that they had in the U.S. And kind of different forces conspiring against them, including themselves in some ways. So that's a book that I'm working on. It's written, but it's being illustrated in the moment by Jacoby Salcedo, one of my best friends. I met him to do mini comics initially. He did The Price of Freedom, which is our first short story together. We did two others called Between Two Worlds and Balseros, which are all on my website. You can just read for free. They're 4 to 10 pages. But Frontera is our first real work together. It's 236 pages. It'll come out in 2023. And then Si Se Puede is it's for all ages, but it's an adult graphic novel. It's a mixture of fiction and nonfiction. Essentially, it's an exploration of all the Latino heroes that shaped America. So we go from Latino soldiers in the Civil War to Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta in the farm worker struggle, to Ellen Ochoa, the first Latina to go to space, people who are doing work now in the present and in the future. And it's kind of this celebration and exploration of the way that Latinos have contributed to American culture throughout, the country's history. And that'll be through 10 Speed Press in the fall of 2023. And we'll probably get some comic series, direct market comic series between now and then, but nothing that, I can talk about yet.
Man, I'm hyped. Julio, bro, coming with it. I love it. And I love that it's you and it's Latin history, and it's just that representation that we need, man, because that's the battle. And Nerds of Color, that's what we're all about. And you're coming with it, bro. Thank you so much on behalf of all of us out here as POCs wanting that representation. You are coming with it and delivering it, man. Thank you so fucking much, man. I love it.
Thank you, man. And thank you to you guys for, putting together this platform and promoting these voices. I think that's just as important. We can be doing this hard work, this, good work with, our comics, our films, or TV shows, whatever. But we need people like you guys promoting it, and spreading the word and championing it. So thank you.
Definitely, man. Yeah, because if they're not going to showcase it, all those other outlets, then fucking we're going to make it happen. Hell yeah.
Yep.
Bro, I appreciate it so much. And yeah, and like I said, I want a home film or TV series, and I hope they just come knocking at your door. There's all these. I've been on a bunch of diversity panels recently, especially after Asian Pacific American Heritage Month that just passed. But there's a lot of other diversity projects going on. But I'm hoping that it's just not, how like they put us out there for diversity's sake, but it's also we need to be. Exactly. We need the inclusion. We need the power positions to make these stories happen. And let's keep it moving forward. I can't wait for the future. I feel like I've found a kinship with you because I think you and I are so very much the same person. Yep. I would love to do some diversity panels in the future with you and make these voices be heard, our voices be heard. I love it, man. Definitely. I'm such a fan. I can't wait for these other projects. Can't wait for Home to finish up. Before I let you go, man, what we do or what I like to do for the Nerds of Color, NRW, Nerds Rule the World, as my last question is I like to do a nerd check. All right, let's go. I know you're new to the comics, but this isn't just
this one.
This isn't just your traditional pulp culture stuff. It doesn't have to be, the glitz, the nerd pop culture stuff. For the nerd check, it could be, what would you give like a TED talk on? What are you so passionate, nerdy about that you could give a TED talk on anything? I've had some people say tax law, of all things. They can tell me all the presidents, politics. Some are deep Star Trek fans. Some are like, tech geeks. What is something, if somebody were to test you on and you would give a TED talk on, that you could talk about 24/7 all day, or give a presentation on?
Yeah. Right, you know what, man? Probably record collecting.
Okay. Vinyl guy?
Yeah, man. Yeah. So, like anything in the punk, hardcore, indie space, obscure labels, whatever, I can probably speak on that. When it comes to hip hop, any of the, MF Doom, Madlib, that whole culture, Stone's Throw, I can probably speak on any of that. Just the music that I love, probably.
Hell yeah. I'm all about that. I love it. I'm a vinyl guy myself, brother. Nice. What's your most prized vinyl record that you sought after, that was hard for you to find there, or that you just had to have for your collection? Or if the house is burning and you can only pull one vinyl out, what would it be?
You know what, man? It's probably a tape, cassette tape.
Oh,
one of to me, one of the most underrated songwriters is this guy named David Bazan. Okay. He was in a band called Pedro the Lion. Some of the most like introspective, emotional. He's a guy kind of like me that came out of the evangelical space. And came out of the other side of it with a new perspective. But his first demo tape, no one knows other than him. Maybe he might not even remember how many copies were made of it. But I tracked down a copy a couple of years ago, paid a decent amount for it. But it's one of those things where nobody really knows what it's worth because it never goes up for sale. It's never really available. But yeah, his first demo tape, that's probably something I'd rush in to grab before, the place burns down.
Hell yeah. I love it. It's priceless, man. There's certain things that are just priceless to us, man. And I thank you for sharing that immensely. That's awesome, bro. One more thing before I let you go for this part of the interview is, can you tell for our audio listeners how they can reach out to you, the new fans? I will have the information in the description below, but for those listening from audio purposes, how they can hit you up online, socials, websites, all of that.
Yeah, socials, it's all going to be my name, Julio Anta, Twitter, Instagram, whatever. My website, julioanta.com. You can go there. I have a newsletter. I haven't sent any emails out yet. It's going to happen soon. But, socials, my website, you can find out when Home is coming out, when every issue, depending on when you listen to this. June 16th is going to be Home number 3. And then July we'll have number 4. August we'll have number 5. And like I said, on my website, you can read some mini comics also. They're free. They're just right there to read. But yeah, follow me on Twitter, Instagram for future projects.
Awesome. I love it. I'm going to be doing that. I think I'm already doing that, if I'm not mistaken. If not, I'll be doing that as soon as I'm done with this. Julio, man, honest to God, man, truly a pleasure. I love what you're doing as a POC myself and working in this creative space and community. That's what you're doing, the art that we create. That's what I'm all about. And so thank you for being that voice for the Latinx community. I know I'm trying to do that and then just as for all of us as immigrants as well. And just, for sure. It's such a, the fabric of America is, that we know what's out there and what is always being put out there, but there's so much more that needs to be told. And I thank you for help delivering that message because it's so important.
Thank you for helping me spread it, man. I appreciate it.
Definitely, man.
Thanks for having me.
Hell yeah. It's your boy, Kuyapi. You can follow me at Strange Since 1977, as well as at Temple Far East, at the NRW, where nerds rule the world, and it's at the NRW and at Nerds Wednesday, and at the Nerds of Color, where we give you pop culture from the POC perspective, and that's at the Nerds of Color on everything. For Julio Anta, Kuyapi, we're out of here.
Hey everyone, I'm Julio Anta. I'm going to be on the NRW talking about Home, my new image series. It's a story about a young boy separated from his mother at the border, just as superhuman abilities begin to develop in him. I'm going to talk a lot about it on the show. I hope you'll check it out. You can follow me on Twitter at Julio Anta or Instagram at Julio Anta and check out the show. Thank you. Hey everyone, I'm Julio Anta. For me, being a nerd of color means centering my work on what it means to be Latinx and creating characters that represent a diverse Latinx community in an empathetic and realistic way, free of the stereotypes we're often weighed down with in most media.